Hey guys, so my name is Stephanie Poe. I have a PhD in immunology from the University of Pittsburgh. And today I want to teach you guys about respiratory health and how it relates to essential oils and how it relates to my entire thesis project. So just a little bit of background. I've been using essential oils in my home with my two kids from the time that they were 2 months old and 2.5 years old. And it's been 8 years. And over and over and over again, I'm so grateful for the power of these oils. And over and over and over again, I'm so grateful for the way in which my background prepared me to not only use oils effectively in my home, but also to educate other moms, other humans about how to use them. So this complete talk is 100% respiratory health today. And I'm going to use a PowerPoint just to kind of go over this and make it clear. So, my PhD, again, is from the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. I worked for 6 years. It took me about 5.5 years for my PhD to complete in the pulmonary and critical care medicine division. So that is in Pittsburgh, obviously. And I finished that in 2012. And it's been over 10 years, which is crazy, crazy, crazy to think about. So here we go. I'm just going to dive in. So here's an overview of the talk. Part one, I'm going to explain to you guys exactly what I studied. Part two, I'm going to present some research evidence as to the role of essential oils in the lung. Part three, I'm going to discuss two really specific oils. And then I also want to go over the importance of omega-3s because we have a lot of just goodies and nuggets in doTERRA that we have access to. And so I want to give you guys like a really comprehensive view of respiratory health, how it works, and how these tools can really impact us for good. So in my thesis, I used this quote kind of at the beginning. So anytime we have inflammation going on in the lung injury, respiratory, coughs, congestion, whatever is going on, there's a really delicate balance between initiating inflammation. So our immune system needs to initiate, it needs to attack, right? We need to control microbial invasion. And then also dampening that same inflammation to prevent tissue injury to our lungs. So right away, I really want you guys to picture the fact that our immune system has to react to a microbe, okay? Inflammation is there to protect us. But that same inflammation, when it gets out of control, is actually the thing that causes injury and chronic issues, okay? So just right off the bat, you got to kind of think about that yo-yo that's always going on in the lung. So our lungs, there's a picture on the left, kind of graphic there. This is a very simple overview, right? We inhale through our mouth, oxygen, rich air travels down our trachea and then into one of our lungs. From there, the air is actually directed to smaller and smaller and smaller passages called bronchioles until it finally enters an individual alveolar space. Okay, and that space, those little tiny air pockets are going to be really important for the rest of this talk. So that is where oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange happens, all right? So oxygen has to enter our bloodstream and then carbon dioxide, right? We obviously are breathing that out. So that like air pocket, those individual spaces, conditions that affect those include pneumonia. An infection will inflame that space and it ends up with filling it with pus, basically, okay? You can imagine that's really detrimental to our ability to breathe and effectively get oxygen into our body through our bloodstream. Emphysema and tuberculosis also affect the alveoli. ARDS, or acute respiratory distress syndrome, also affects it. And then pulmonary edema, okay, that is fluid collecting in this area. So our immune system, I'm going to highlight two specific cell types that are involved anytime we have infection happening in our lungs. Okay, the first is macrophages, okay? They actually patrol this space. So that graphic you guys see on the left is like one of those individual air pockets like blown up, okay? So you can picture the immune cells working there, all right? So macrophages in our immune system, they're there to kind of engulf bacteria. And when they engulf bacteria, they then in turn like present that bacteria on their surface right? And it starts to direct immune traffic. It's basically that cell type is going to kind of tell the rest of our immune system how to respond and what to do. Okay, so they have a really, really good function, and there's lots of different sorts of this particular cell type, macrophage. Neutrophils, okay, you can see them also in this graphic. There's a little, they have the granules inside, the purple granules. They migrate into this alveolar lumen or alveolar space. They also phagocytose bacteria. But you can think of them as like very reactive. So they produce things like enzymes to like chew up the bacteria and reactive oxygen species just to create more inflammation to really get the bacteria to be killed and go away. So again, neutrophils are very necessary, but they can get out of control. They're not very specific, right? And they actually, if left out, like unchecked, they are the cell type that is going to create actually damaging inflammation. So again, good inflammation, bad inflammation. We want good inflammation. We don't want bad inflammation. And this concept, you can apply it to like every disease condition. Okay. Think about the such times in your life where your immune system, you have a fever or your immune system is responding, right? Those are good things, but you don't want it to persist. Okay, this is a concept that I really want you guys to understand. So why do we care about that neutrophil, macrophage, how they're interacting? Okay, impaired clearance of those neutrophils, right? We got to get them out of the alveolar space. If we do not have clearance of them, it results in persistent inflammation and lung injury. Neutrophils are, think of them as both good and bad, as in like very, very, very bad. All right. So anytime you have an infection, I personally studied hospital-acquired infection, and this was, it's near and dear to a lot of us because I think all of us know people that have gone into the hospital and, with some sort of infection, and there seems to be like a 48 to 72 hour window where somebody either recovers or they succumb. And that window is delicate. The things that are happening in there are delicate, right? And there isn't a lot to explain necessarily. Like, this was a question that I was really curious about understanding during my thesis work. Why is it that some humans recover and why some don't? What exactly is going on in the lung? And that's what I investigated. Okay, so you have an infection. This is a picture, it's a slide that I created of what's going on in the lung. The purple is, you can think of it as it's the neutrophils. Okay, they're coming in, or it's oh my gosh, it's been so long, guys. I don't know if the purple in that slide is the bacteria or the neutrophils. Okay, I probably should know that, but you can think of the lung as experiencing inflammation. Okay, so I think it's the bacteria. Okay. So I should cut this part of the talk out, but I'm not, because I'm human and it's been 11 years. So that's fine. So anyways, we have infection, our immune system responds, and there are two different outcomes. Inflammation either gets resolved or it persists. Okay. It persists. So this is a summary of my thesis, and I'm going to share with you guys like specific graphs from my my paper, but essentially I'm going to just go through this. Okay, so on the left and right, we have the picture over the course of 72 hours of what an infection looks like during non-resolving pneumonia. Okay, so non-resolving pneumonia in red, and the highlight here is that we have massive amounts of neutrophil accumulation. Okay, so at the beginning of the infection, the macrophages are there, the neutrophils are coming in, we're creating pro-inflammatory cytokines, increasing inflammation. Okay, things like nitric oxide are being increased, interleukin-6, that's pro-inflammatory, interferon, TNF-alpha, those are pro-inflammatory cytokines. Okay, and over 72 hours, we have a situation in which although we are getting an anti-inflammatory push from the macrophages, okay, these myeloid-derived suppressor cells, which we identified in the lung, We're getting signals from them. Hey, 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 time for the inflammation to go away. Neutrophils, we don't need you anymore. We don't need you anymore. And the signal for this is interleukin 10. Interleukin 10 is a cytokine that is produced by immune system cells that teaches inflammation to die down. Okay. So over this non-resolving pneumonia situation, we have infection. We had inflammation created by our immune system, and then we have this push for the inflammation to be resolved, but the inflammation is not getting resolved, okay? There's not enough interleukin 10, and the neutrophil burden, the amount of neutrophils is too far outweighing the amount of macrophages, healthy anti-inflammatory macrophages in the lung, and we succumb, okay? These myeloid-derived suppressor cells, which is a form of a macrophage, are very critical for preventing acute lung injury during pneumonia, okay? So when we don't have a high enough amount of them compared to the amount of neutrophils, which we really do need to control, 48 to 72 hours, we need neutrophils to go away. That ratio one of the questions I asked was, can we change that? Can we change that ratio? Is there a drug? This could be a drug target. Is there a drug that can change this ratio so that we have all the inflammation necessary to kill the bacteria that are causing the infection, but at the same time, we can teach that inflammation to die down when it's appropriate for that inflammation to die down, okay? Again, applies to like all of our immune system. So I ended my thesis, okay, with this question and challenge to the entire research community. The challenge for the next decade is to develop approaches, at the time I meant drugs, guys, to keep neutrophils in the lung for their defensive functions, right? We wanted them to kill the microbes while modulating their undesirable effects that actually lead to inflammatory lung damage. And my thesis showed that it is entirely that inflammatory lung damage, which is the thing that leads to death. It is not actually the bacteria, okay? So we need both. So I want to highlight again, I already mentioned interleukin 10, but I want to go back to the cytokine, and I am going to talk about oils, don't worry, okay? So these are slides, okay? And think the more like red, purple color on the slide, like the worse off, okay? The worse off we are. So interleukin 10, I have mice that have adequate amounts of interleukin 10. They're called wild type mice. And I have mice that do not produce interleukin 10. That gene had been knocked out, okay? So on the left, you see 48 hours after infection, okay? This is a high dose of bacteria that I gave these mice. The wild type mice had lots of bacteria. In the absence of interleukin 10, the bacteria, because interleukin 10 is anti-inflammatory, right? So it was going to like teach the immune system not to respond as fast. In the absence of interleukin 10, you're getting less bacteria, okay? So the mice looked better initially. But when I carried out the infection and did the mortality studies, the mice that did not have an ability to make interleukin 10, look at their lungs at 144 hours post-infection. The wild type mice who can make interleukin 10 were able to clear their lungs, okay? The neutrophils were gone, the infection was somewhat gone, all right? Now all the infection was gone, but the lungs were not inflamed. In the absence of interleukin 10, even though bacteria weren't present, there was increased mortality because of overwhelming inflammation. Interleukin 10 is so important for our ability to control inflammation in our lungs. So when I came to doTERRA, okay, 8 years ago, and then it was 6 years ago that I think I gave this talk for the first time, my brain was like, okay, how do essential oils work in our lung? What does frankincense do to interleukin 10 production? Okay, this was my question. So I looked it up. So frankincense, extracts of frankincense decrease levels of TNF alpha, interleukin-1, interleukin-6, interleukin-8, all these anti-inflammatory cytokines or inflammatory cytokines, frankincense down regulates them, but it increases interleukin-10 in a concentration-dependent manner. It works, okay, research had already shown this. This wasn't my work. It works by blocking the infiltration and adhesion of neutrophils into the area. A small placebo-controlled study in adults reported that subjects taking frankincense had fewer asthmatic exacerbations and improved lung function. Oh, that's also interesting. And multiple studies in various disease models, again, all diseases have this. We need inflammation, but then we've got to get it to go away. Frankincense down regulates pro-inflammatory cytokines. So it essentially teaches our immune system to behave. So we need it, right? And guys, we already know that, right? Frankincense has been traded for 6,000 years for medicinal purposes. We know that when we apply it to joints, our joints hurt less, right? We know when we are getting it into our body, especially under our tongue, on the roof of our mouth, our like inflammation in our nervous system, right? Everything calms down. We have experienced frankincense. All I am sharing with you is that there's actual research evidence showing that it modulates the levels of inflammatory cytokines in our body, and in fact does increase interleukin-10, that key cytokine that I was studying that's important and critical for the immune system in the lung to die down appropriately after an infection. So frankincense is key, okay? If we do have a microbial invasion and infection going on in our lungs, we do also want to use essential oils that are antimicrobial, right? Because we don't want the bacteria to just be there. We don't want to just regulate inflammation. We do need to support our actual inflammatory process in getting rid of the thing that's creating it in the first place, right? So Breathe, we have this beautiful blend in doTERRA. Breathe contains all of these essential oils on the left. So laurel leaf, it is known to be antimicrobial. Ravensara, antimicrobial. Ravensara, antimicrobial, okay? Interesting, that's like a cross between clove and nutmeg, which I really never knew. Tea tree, antimicrobial and helps reduce allergic inflammation. That is a whole other talk. I was in the allergy department, right? So I think a lot about that. Eucalyptus, antimicrobial. Lemon, promotes drainage, relieves congestion. Cardamom, stops the lung from spasming. Okay, one of my favorite ways to use cardamom is just put like 2 drops on my hands when my kids are coughing, right? And I will run them through their hair. It's like a great way to cuddle up with your kids and like get that cardamom, like your hands are acting kind of like a diffuser, right, in their hair. Peppermint is in there also. It's cooling, opening, and anti-inflammatory. Okay, so this is Breathe. So this is what I suggest to you is the perfect scientifically validated, well thought through formulated blend that we have from doTERRA. And I want you guys to pair it with frankincense because we need our immune system to respond. We need the bacteria to go away. And we really want to support levels of interleukin-10 production so that the actual neutrophil infiltration into our lungs does not persist and cause lung injury, which creates great damage in our lungs. So this is a post that I wrote. There's a lot of words on this slide, so don't even try to read it, just listen to me, okay? I started just thinking about this and just wrote, okay? Grad school feels like forever ago, but my PhD research was so cool. I showed how a certain cell type, myeloid-derived suppressor cells in our lungs, control inflammation. When somebody has pneumonia, their lung function is compromised because of inflammation. I think that should be clear to you at this point. Our immune system has to kill the bacteria that caused the infection, but then it needs to get the heck out of the lung. Our body has to get better at regulating inflammation in our lung, and that cell type that I discovered helps. Do you know what supports the development of that cell? A certain signaling pathway, including interleukin-10. When I search for frankincense and interleukin-10, yes, yes, yes. It helps neutrophils not flood into the lung, okay? So I started sharing, hey, your kid is coughing, you're experiencing respiratory junk, you have like pulmonary, whatever is going on with you. I want you to combine frankincense and Breathe and get it on your chest. And I want you to do this multiple times a day. It's both oils, Okay. Just 2 weeks ago, I was on a call just 2 weeks ago. Okay. So this talk was 6 years ago when I initially recorded it. Just 2 weeks ago, I was on a call with a mom who they had been struggling with chronic respiratory issues with their son for like 2 to 3 years. And one of my friends overheard her talking in like kindergarten pickup line and was like, hey, would you mind if I gave you some oils to try? And my friend, having been in my downline for quite some time, knew to put frankincense and breathe together in a roller ball. And she gave it, she shared it with her new friend. And that friend was, at her wit's end a couple of nights later, son coughing so much, reached for this crazy hippie mama medicine, whatever it was, applied it to her son's chest. He stopped coughing, slept through the night. So 3 years of effort in our modern medical system, all the tests in the world, all the allergy tests in the world, and essential oils have been the only thing that truly has helped. That brings tears to my eyes because I would have never started talking about breathe and frankincense together without my thesis project. And during my thesis for 5.5 years of difficult research, it's difficult to get a PhD, right? Just lots of work, lots of late nights, lots of early mornings. I had never even heard of an essential oil. Okay. So you see how it's like this, like really cool, just like kind of full circle moment for me. So I am so thankful for doTERRA essential oils and how they help. So I wanted to give you guys a respiratory rub recipe with just some like I know I got this from another wellness advocate. I saw it online. I do not know who to give the credit to. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to give you guys some of the reason why I like it and why it works. So obviously frankincense is in there. Talked about that enough today. Cypress possesses antibacterial activity, was found to kill Klebsiella. Klebsiella is the bacteria that I used for my research. It's the main culprit in hospital settings that causes that hospital-acquired pneumonia. Okay. Cypress is also mucolytic. It helps break down mucus. Ginger, right? It also is known to reduce mucus secretion and was shown to do it. So think about promoting clear breathing. Siberian fir is a really, really calming for our muscles. So think about soothing those sore muscles that come with those coughing fits. Thyme essential oil. I have a video that I think somewhat went viral in the doTERRA community. And the reason is that thyme was approved, right? And known to be a cleaner that was effective against coronaviruses. And I thought about thyme and I thought, oh, isn't that interesting that it's effective against coronaviruses, but is also known to produce interleukin 10. It's also known to affect that pathway. So again, it's both antiviral and keeping our inflammation under control. So I love, love, love thyme for anything respiratory because again, it's both. Tea tree, super staple. Okay. It's just such a great oil. All right. So lastly, before I close this out, a number of years ago now, I had walked into University of Pittsburgh. I walked to see my old thesis mentor and I got to catch up with her for the first time in years. And I shared with her what I was doing now. And I shared with her everything that I was learning about frankincense and breathe and how I think that they were the answer to the question that I had posed at the end of my thesis. And I expected her to kind of just like roll her eyes, whatever. I knew she wouldn't do that. She's brilliant. But she was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, this huge paper just came out in the New England Journal of Medicine, which if you are in research and you get published in this journal, it's like the premier place, okay? And it talks about how fish oil derived fatty acids, so omega-3s, are so important during pregnancy as the baby is developing in utero, and that when there was not adequate amounts of omega-3s in the mother's diet, the incidence of wheezing and asthma in the babies was like far greater, okay? Definitely a correlation. So when we are thinking about respiratory health and controlling inflammation in our lung, it's not just the topical application of essential oils, which we know in doTERRA, we know prevention, prevention, prevention. Our wellness pyramid starts with nutrition, right? So we have got to get adequate amounts of omega-3s in our diet for our own respiratory health and if we're planning on, conceiving for our babies. So that is just, I don't know, that again was like a full circle moment for me, right? Because we know that our omega-3s, when they're combined with little bits of essential oils, they actually are very, very bioavailable and they get in. So the way that our Lifelong Vitality Pack and the XE Omega is formulated is like highly beneficial for our respiratory health. And I don't think that that is talked about or highlighted enough. So the challenge for the next decade, which I think in doTERRA we have an answer for, which makes me emotional and so grateful, is to develop approaches to keep neutrophils in the lung for defensive functions while modulating their undesirable effects that lead to inflammatory lung damage. So please teach people to use a combination of frankincense and breathe, to use a little oil and to use it often, and just know that it is working in ways that are very unseen and tiny to help regulate inflammation in our lung. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this. You are free to email me at hello@drstephaniepoe.com, and also check out my website, eastendoils.com. There's a bunch of classes and just, information for you guys linked there. Thanks.